as it were. The siding was just over 7,000 feet long, allowing a train of at most 150 cars. There is no way to extend it since it was sandwiched between two descending tunnels at the top of the summit. Ergo, that's why they only pulled trains as long as they did. They were limited. And I say this as side commentary. People often compare the Alleghenies to the big boys and say that they weren't as capable, or they didn't pull as long of trains, but when in reality this may not have been the case. They were physically limited in the grade that they pulled them between to 150 cars. Anyway, here is a picture of the Alleghenies firebox when built. Notice the 3 siphon tubes, I do believe, or it anyway, this is the giant H8 firebox. It was so large it required a 6-wheel trailing truck. No other locomotive uses 6-wheel trailing truck except the almost identical 2666 built by Lima for the Virginian Railway in 1945. They were called Blue Ridge class, by the way. Lima Locomotive Works photo, Chesapeake, Ohio, Historical Society. Now, of course, on a side note, getting away from the article, Lima proposed to build a type of locomotive that would have been a 486, basically putting an Allegheny firebox on like a Berkshire or Northern and putting poppet valves on it. But the design was only on paper, and there's a lot of speculation as to its actual capabilities were it to have been built. But anyway, thus the standard train, as I just mentioned, of 145 cars, around 11,500 tons, seems to be based on as much of the physical plan as performance of the engine. Wait again. Some have asserted, regardless of the weight overrun, the H8 was just too heavy for its capability, and that its power did not justify its great weight. Granting the H8, or at least the first 45 of them, was the heaviest steam locomotive built. That is not the entire story, because they were also the most powerful locomotives. The obvious way to test this assertion would be to measure the ratio of drawbar horsepower to engine weight and compare it to contemporary locomotives as seen in Figure 6, which I will show you in a minute. Note the H8 falls into the middle of the group at 4.84 horsepower per ton, substantially better than some well-regarded engines like the UP Big Boy, Norfolk and Western Y6B, and almost the same as the highly regarded Norfolk and Western J, like 611. It is clear that criticizing the Allegheny for being too heavy for its power output is not justified by the facts. And I'll show you that table real quick. This was the table they were talking about. At the top you have the power to weight ratio for a number of superpower locomotives that were contemporaries of the H8. The highly regarded Norfolk and Western A class 2664s near the head of the pack at 5,500 horsepower per ton of engine. The Allegheny are in the middle of the group with a power to weight ratio of 4.84 for the first orders and 4.99 for the last group, almost 5, a value that is 91% of the Class A. A number of highly regarded locomotives fall well below the Alleghenies by this measure, including the Union Pacific Big Boy, which is near the bottom of the group. So as you can see, you have power to weight, you have the Pierre Marquette N2 class. Well, that was a Berkshire configuration. Then you have the Norfolk and Western A, the S1B 484s. I do believe that. And the next one you have the New York Central 464s. I believe the S1B referred to the Niagaras, which were all scrapped, unfortunately. They had some of the highest horsepower rating for their size, almost 6,000 horsepower in a northern configuration, which were normally 5,000 horsepower, which is still more than a lot of modern engines to this day. Anyway, going down the list, you have the different classes. Here's the H8, last order 4.9, Norfolk and Western J, the Northern, like 611. And then you have the first order at 4.84, the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe 5001 or 5001 210-4s, and then more of those. Here's the Y6B 2882s, the CNOT1s, the ones that it would run alongside in the Ohio area, Union Pacific 800 484s. I believe that's what 844 was, the very last Alco locomotive bought by the Union Pacific, or it was the very last steam engine bought by the Union Pacific and still running to this day. The only one actually that was never retired from service officially, nor stricken from its original railroad's roster. Then you have the 800 class, of course, and then the big boy, and then the West Virginia, or West. Well, actually, I'm not sure what this one is. Anyway, back to the article here. Back to the actual article. And here we go. Could the Allegheny be improved? Noted. CNO author Gene Huddleston stated on many occasions he thought the H8 would have been better engine if it had been designed to run at 300 psi, raising the boiler pressure from 260 to 300 psi. Also, on a side note, on the Lima Locomotive Works website, I pulled this up. Talks about the superpower era. Bill Woodard talks about how he was, after he had left the Lima Locomotive Works, Woodard continued to do engineering design for the firms and working for other coffin-owned firms. Here's Joel Coffin, one of the other guys that worked on the Lima Superpower. In 1942, he was working on a design for a poppet valve equipped 2666 Allegheny configuration with a 25% increase in horsepower and a radical change in boiler designs with much higher operating pressure. Now, could you imagine this thing with 300 and poppet valves with 25% more horsepower than even it actually had? You're talking almost 9,000 horsepower. Now, of course, I've also had some hearsay at the Fort Wayne Railroad Historical Society that said they had experimented with 300 pounds, but it was actually popping the drawbars on the back that connect the rear of the train. You have two of them. One is a shorter one it's used, and if that one pops, it goes to a longer one. They're forged. I'll have to get some pictures of it. Anyway, I'm about to run out of battery, so here we go. Could it be improved? I'll just run through this article real quick here and let you read it. It says they could have been equipped with a booster.